So, gotta get a better intro, man. How you all doing? I'm going a little early today from when it was scheduled because I've overscheduled today. Since I have a day, I just scheduled everything on it, and I've had to cancel like 3 interviews and 2 podcasts. And I actually have to leave the house relatively soon. But I've been meaning to do this day 5 stream for a while, so I wanted to do it and let you all know what I've changed on the projection model, update the projection model, and show you a little bit of how to actually work it to make projections, because realize we didn't cover that. So yeah, what's up? If you've got any questions, let me know. This is going in a playlist on YouTube for all 5 of the streams that we've done so far, where we've built this thing. The idea being, you know how everything is and where how everything works and where everything is, so you can change it, update it, modify it, even maybe make your own, or at least use this as a base to make your own. And yeah, that's it. And I went again crazy off stream and moved stuff around. I didn't invent nothing. Don't worry, it's not new. I just moved something. Specifically, I moved the little assumptions section we had into a separate tab because I was talking to Jax Falcone on his podcast, whose name I forget, to be honest. But he was talking about using an online web app to make projections, or something on a website somewhere. And he was talking about how easy it was. And it's like, it's the exact same thing, though. It's like, yeah, but it's easy. And I realized the ease of it was the interface. And so, hey, Connor, I changed the interface for how to make projections. That's ultimately what I've changed. And let me show you how. That's too big. All right. Hang on. All right, so this is our projection model. Let me go big screen just for a second. That we built, and you realize I've got all this conditional formatting in, some of which won't translate to Google Sheets, like these missing volume bars, little red and blue bars, and the orange bars. These won't translate to Google because they don't have that formatting. But other than that, it's the exact same thing. And what we had was it's calculating regression across a bunch of stats and averaging a bunch of stuff to give us like a base projection to work with. But the difference between projection and a model is that we make our own assumptions. That's the whole point. We're going to input stuff the models we created can't take into account. But we had this little volume section, and I've list pass attempts. So if you really want to rack up or down a player's passing attempts, you can. Right here, you can say this player is going to get 1% of passing attempts or 100%, and the projections adjust accordingly. Same with ADOT, catch percentage, and interception percentage. Generally, though, those aren't things you really have to or necessarily want to mess with, except for maybe catch percentage, but I was trying to keep it as simple as possible in the new interface. Interception percentage, I almost feel no inclination to change at any time, so I just left it in here. So all the work we've done is still in here, and we can change the averages and the settings for touch shares to calculate different things. But, you know, it's how we set it up. But what I did is I created this assumptions tab. So it's got it listed by team and player and everything else. But all you have to do is work through this assumption tab. So it shows you the last 3 years of that player's stats. So let's say Arizona, for example, James Conner in 2020 had 53% of his team's rushing attempts. He had 54% of his team's rushing attempts in 2019. And it shows you the projection as it currently stands as 53.5%. Now, because you know that Arizona is a different team and he's moved there, you can rack that down to 45% if you want. Or you can rack it down to 10% if you just think he's done, I guess, or even less. Or you can leave it with a base projection of 53.5%. Now, notice over here, you've also got the rushing attempts column, that missing volume section that I created over here. I recreated it in this assumptions tab. So as you change projections, you can see how it affects the overall team volume. See that? Neat. And that kind of gives you an idea of if you're over or under projecting the team expectations we created with that regression model over here. And the idea is you work through it, limiting or expanding volume to try and get as close as possible to that expectation. But Let me show you an exception with New Orleans. And the whole idea here is you can project anything you want, but it's giving you guide rails. So you can't go too far off the rails or too far off the track. Or if you do, it tells you you're going too far off the track. Or based on our regression model assumptions anyway. So with New Orleans, it's now got a new quarterback in the form of either Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston, obviously. Currently, it's projecting the team to pass 60 fewer times this year than we would expect based on the regression model. But honestly, isn't that fair when you don't have Drew Brees anymore? I mean, you could expect them to pass even more. So you bump Alvin Kamara's projection up, and I don't know, Ty Montgomery or whoever, 10% of target share, because they're going to be losing so much more. But I actually think that their volume was a product of Drew Brees being Drew Brees and being incredibly successful at passing. So them actually coming under the projection is fine by me. I still make changes. I've taken all my assumptions out here, but so that you can play it on your own. But you can accept that this should be less because Drew Brees and Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill aren't the same thing. All right. So the idea is you can make assumptions about rushing volume, and then you can move over and make assumptions about targets, and the same thing happens. It shows you how many targets. And you'll notice since we're projecting a 17-game season right now, and when we're used to projecting a 16-game season, target shares are a little off, and so you see a lot of this. We're projecting way too many targets in Atlanta, but that's also because AJ Green's there now. And even at his age, the model is giving him an 80% target share. You can rank that down to 10 and get it closer to volume or whatever else. Or maybe you think Larry Fitzgerald is the one who's done. Now, the game projection still works over here in the model. This is where we make our assumptions about who's at what place on the depth chart and how many games they're going to play or how many games they're going to record fantasy stats. So we do all of that work. That's the first thing you do. You go through, you manicure your depth charts, make sure you've got the running back 1, 2, and 3 in order, the wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 in order. And that's in terms of overall touches that you think that those players are going to get. And then you can assume how many games they're going to play. So if you think Max Williams is only going to record stats in 5 games, you just change that to a 5, obviously. Now, these offer room for improvement. We could actually create something that projects games based on injury rates, for example, or you could calculate depth charts or import depth charts from your favorite site. But we're a basic bitch model. These are just hand assumptions that you can make, all right? So once you've made those assumptions and you can made those statements, if you will, then you can move over to the assumptions tab. You make assumptions about rushing volume. You make assumptions about target share. And that should give you a basic projection, spitting it out in your ranks over here. I've got it listed so far. So it spits out the first 32 quarterbacks, spits out the first 75 running backs, the first 100 wide receivers in overall points, and then the first 40 or so tight ends. It's also pulling on all the stats that you might want. Like I'm calculating what your projections say is going to be their opportunity share, their points per opportunity, and also the yards per team attempt. I also created this little column in yellow here. This is pulling in the player's average yards per team attempt, just so you can kind of see how you're doing compared to the player's average. I like those kind of columns just to let me know if anything looks too weird or too wild or too wonderful for that matter. All right. In the assumptions tab, after you've made volume projections, I actually have some efficiencies over here. So you can decide that Kyler Murray's yards per carry in rushing yards is too high, or maybe James Conner's 4.27 is too low. So you can push him back up to an average of 4.5 or whatever. You can also make assumptions about receiving efficiency, or you can just leave it on the base projection, which is in that orange column, obviously. But sometimes this is necessary. If we go down to San Francisco, for example, I've actually left this one in. And because Deebo Samuel's shortened the sample and where he gets targets, his projected racer is just way too high. For example, if you take out my assumption here, he's projected for a 2.69 racer, when on average, a one racer is exceptional. Like that's what Justin Jefferson was getting last year, like 1.3. So this 2.69 does nasty things when it comes to looking at San Francisco. And you can tell that when you go back over to your ranks. You see, it puts Trey Lance as a number 1 overall, and it puts Deebo Samuel as the number 1 wide receiver overall. So yeah, occasionally a player's sample size or his stats are just not going to work well, just because sometimes they exhibit exceptional efficiency on small samples. So you can rank that back down to 0.8, which is a very good racer, especially for as A dot is, and that's just something I know. And that brings it all back into line. You can also make assumptions about their touchdowns, which is actually where you're going to, I find I've make the most assumptions, because touchdowns are basically random, and you can see a lot of change in players' touchdown rates. So this is where the average tab comes in as well, because you can go and look at, on average, how many touchdowns per passing attempt does a tight end get? It's around 113 yards passing before for a tight end, before a quarterback gets a passing touchdown. Same, you can see the running backs, 17 yards of passing before they get a passing touchdown, because it relatively rarely happens that they pass the ball. It's normally in the red zone, so on and so forth. You can also see that a wide receiver's receiving average is around 157 yards per touchdown. So by the time we get to 157 receiving yards, they normally have a touchdown. Now, obviously, some players are much closer to 0, which is why they don't all have the same projection. Tight ends score a touchdown every 130 yards or so, receiving yards. Sorry, I need a drink. Running backs score a rushing touchdown around every 113 yards. And this is why I like going through a yards touchdown rate, because it makes sense. If you see Clyde Edwards-Helaire has 113 yards rushing and doesn't have a touchdown, hey, Kuda, that'd be a little weird, even for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? So this is on the high side, but that makes sense because we're just looking for an average to give us an idea of what's a good or average touchdown rate. And so they can guide you before as you get used to these stats. But receiving touchdowns, for example, James Conner's going to have to get 290 receiving yards before he catches a full receiving touchdown. On average, that's around 80 yards too high. So you can look at his history and see that he's got, in 2018, he had 497 receiving yards for every touchdown. In 2019, he had 83 yards for every touchdown. And you can see why it's giving him that 290, but maybe you think it's a little unfair, so you bring it back up to 200 yards per touchdown receiving, 150, or whatever you want to project for him. So that's receiving touchdowns. You can also do rushing touchdowns over here. See, James Conner is actually pretty close to the average for rushing touchdowns per rushing yard. You can make him more efficient if you think the Cardinals are going to do that for him, or he's going to do that for the Cardinals, and so on and so forth. So we make volume assumptions, then we make efficiency assumptions, and my basic goal is to make as few assumptions as possible, because I really don't want to implant my version of reality on every player, but sometimes it's necessary. So first I work through and get these volume expectations and missing rushing attempts and missing targets into line with our projection, or as close to into line with projection as I want. Like I mentioned with New Orleans, I'm expecting to under project the New Orleans offense, because I just don't think they're going to pass as much with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill instead of Drew Brees. And so when it comes to touchdowns in New Orleans, I'm going to expect to disagree with our touchdown regression model and leave it with excessive passing attempts still left on the field. All right. And that's it. And that way, this one tab is just an interface for you to make assumptions about volume, touchdown efficiency, receiving and rushing efficiency, and then the ranks tab will spit out your actual projections. So you don't have to fool with this big mother that we actually built, unless you really want to dig in and, change a player's ADOT. For example, on the Seahawks, that's one advantage I give DK Metcalf over Tyler Lockett. I think DK Metcalf is more prone to those deeper plays. Right now, both their ADOTs are listed around about the same. Like Tyler Lockett is 10, they're not the same at all. Around 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, or 10 yards down the field, and DK Metcalf has 13 yards down the field. And if you wanted to increase that, that's why, because I put that in. But DK Metcalf's ADOT is around about the same, and I don't agree with that. Actually, I don't agree with that at all. I don't know why it's doing that. Hang on, I gotta check I didn't delete something too much for you. Crap. points has to be a raw number, not a percentage. Okay, I can fix that quick. Sorry, I got my sheet locked right now. Take out that assumption, and we should be good. All right. So you can change A dot. You can change catch percentage, which might be something you want to investigate a little bit much because it seems to underprotect catch rate just a little bit, and based on the team and player average that we've been using. Yeah, I've broken this formula, so I'm gonna have to fix that real quick. Oh, that's why. Okay. I deleted a column in the player history and that destroyed the formula. Where's opportunities? Right there. Sorry, well, I was trying to clean up your data so it's a little easier to read. There we go. Just going to check I didn't break anything else. I'm looking up here to see if there's any, if it's trying to reference cells that don't exist anymore, basically. Okay, we're good. And you can also see in the player history, I moved stuff around and color coded it a little bit to be volume. This is the efficiency in terms of catch percentage and the QB dependent metrics we created because of it. This is efficiency in the blue cells, and then we've just got touchdowns and also like opportunity share and historical stats when we want to compare players to. We also created this team tab, so this is based on your projections, so you can see, how many targets we're actually projecting for a team or how many rushing attempts, and you can see Tampa Bay is way too high. Several of these teams are way too high, actually, because they've got new players on them, and their target shares are just over projecting the offenses. So that gives us a good idea of where to look to ratchet down some players. And we've got this average tab I just pointed out, which gives you a baseline idea of some of these stats and what they should look like. I also created this position finish tab, again, just to give you some historical information about some of these stats. So you can see the points per game for players that finish at every position rank. You can also see the opportunity share of players at every position rank, the odds per team attempt of players that finish at every position rank since 2013 and their average, and also points per opportunity, just so you know what those stats, or you can research what those stats are meant to look like. I just kind of stuck that in there at the end. All right, so let's do a team. I think that'd be simplest to give you an idea on what I'm talking about here. Who did we say was projected for too much? So Tampa Bay is getting 801 targets, which is definitely too many. So let's go to the assumptions tab, check out Tampa Bay. The other thing I should point out with this is these tabs need to be updated. As you change your depth charts, like because it's a new year or you find a player I've missed, you need to copy and paste these 4 first tabs into the assumptions tab so that it can be looking up the same player. That's the only change. All right, so Tampa Bay. Everything else looks up automatically. No. Yeah, this is a problem because you've got 3 wide receiver ones. Let's see. Got Mike Evans projected for 21% of targets, Chris Godwin for 19, Antonio Brown for 19. He actually got 20% of targets last year, which would be higher than I thought. But we can bring Antonio Brown down because I think he's going to be the favorite to lose volume, right? Because he's old. It's not necessarily what I think. We can bring down some of these ancillary players like nothing, because we don't think they're going to get on the field much. Going to leave Darden at 3.8. It's basically nothing, although it's probably optimistic. Cameron Brate is going to be less involved because we've got Gronkowski over there. I think we can bring Jordan Howard down as well. Giovanni Bernard's boosting everything, obviously, so we can bring down some other running backs because we think Gio is going to take some of those targets. And we're still stuck. We're actually stuck bringing Antonio Brown down even further, or taking some off the top of Mike Evans or Chris Godwin to get these receiving targets back in line with our projection. Wow, that was a zoom, wasn't it? All right, there we go. All right, so now what's it saying? Tampa Bay, 640 targets. That's probably a lot more reasonable. And it will change the overall rankings already. Nice. So if we go and look at Tampa Bay, yeah, Tom Brady, quarterback 10, 9, that seems fair. Chris Godwin, wide receiver 13, Mike Evans, wide receiver 25. That's probably a little low for you, since we all love Mike Evans, right? Antonio Brown, wide receiver 52. All right. But also remember, because we've got some other teams being over-projected there, Miami and Arizona and Pittsburgh for sure, probably Philadelphia and Chicago. Probably want to play around with all these volume expectations, actually. That those position ranks will change. All right. And that's it. We just brought them back into line with projection, and suddenly they're not getting 800 passing attempts, which is nice, because we don't think that. Got to bring his rushing attempts down, too. And if you think different things, like you think Giovanni Bernard's going to run away the team, or you think Keyshawn Vaughn's finally going to get good and jump up to 55, you just make different assumptions, if you see what I mean. I don't think Kyle Trask is going to get 4% of attempts as the backup, you know? And Tom Brady's old. He's not going to rush that much anymore. There we go. All right. From there, you can move on to make assumptions about efficiency if they still look wrong for some reason. But yeah, I thought this as an interface would just work better because you can make volume assumptions and you make efficiency assumptions, and you can see 3 years worth of stats as well as the current projection. And it just looks nice, easier, and cleaner than having to deal with this. Because we built kind of a monster, to be honest. Simple monster, but a monster nonetheless. And that's it. I thought it was neat. I think it makes it pretty easy. You've got a player history or the start of your own database if you wanted to keep up with it. With some interesting stats in. Little team tab. Again, I've done relatively little formatting and color coding just so you can kind of make it your own, hopefully, as you play. Also, a whole bunch of relatively simple, as all my formulas are in Excel, to be honest with you. But these formulas are all live, so you can see how I wrote them, just in case you're trying to learn how sum, if, s, or any of those actually work in practice. And yeah, that's the projection engine. I'm pretty comfortable with it, especially since we built it in like 6 days, 6 1-2-hour sessions. And it's doing a pretty decent job, especially once you make your own assumptions. I've already played around with this a little bit, trying to make my own yearly projections, and it snaps back into line with what I think relatively quickly. You've just got to work each team one by one, making volume assumptions in rushing attempts and targets, and then move on to efficiency assumptions with yards per carry and racer. Remember that running backs are using yards per target, so their numbers look slightly different. Because, and I'm sorry, Tanho, racer does not work for running backs. It doesn't. I think yards per touchdown makes a little more intuitive sense, even if you haven't done a lot of projections. So I'm much happier with that than a percentage. I actually really like it. And yeah, we've also got this game section in here now, even in our base model. And right now I've got it set to 17 games because we're now looking at a 17-game season. So that's good too, because we go through the per game stuff, which means even though they increased the number of games, it makes relatively little difference to us. We just change the number of games we're projecting, but we're actually starting out with a per game projection, and so just ratchets it up. Also, I have this historical average points per game on the very right of your ranks tab, which shows you we're over projecting quarterbacks, which again is actually fairly typical. But once we bring targets back into line with average, like we did with Tampa Bay, this will probably go back something like normal. Just kind of give you an eye test of how you're doing compared to historical averages on a per game basis. Yeah, forgot to mention that one. Let's see. Anything else I got to fix, or can I just upload this? We got a live regression model working on team passing attempts. And now you can't necessarily change the projected volume outside of actually over or under projecting the offense. It's just going to show you that you're over or under, but you can, as you can see in the team averages section, project pretty much anything. It's just going to give you a safety barrier to tell you if you're going too far one way or the other based on a reasonable regression model for the team level. But also, it's just a setup where you can plug any stats in from players or team level and these z-scores, and as long as you go find that r-squared, it'll auto-calculate a regression for you. So I think that's pretty cool, actually. But, you know, I'm a nerd, so of course I find it cool. Fake nerd, fake nerd. All right. I probably could have cleaned this average tab up a little bit more, but I'm getting no feedback here, which is fine. I went early, and I've just got Kuda Doodle here to make fun of me, so I imagine I shouldn't expect too much. I really do have to get a whole bunch of stuff done today. So anyway, hopefully someone found this useful and someone finds the model useful. It is the model I'm going to use, or at least the starter of the model I'm going to use to make my yearly projections. And I'm actually going to convert it into a weekly, if I can, projection engine. So this will be what I'm using or modifying to make my own projections. There are a number of things I would change or I would work on to fix, but I think we're good as just something we built on stream to start. I don't want to make it too intense. One, there's some way using strength of schedule. Also, I'd like to include Vegas numbers in here somewhere. But also, I wish we were projecting actual points per game, because we're not. Because when you think about it, if you think, well, let's go to Philadelphia, whose games I had to adjust, because there are just too many players on the depth chart. Like, I think JJ Sega-Whiteside gets a different target share if Alshon Jeffrey isn't playing that week, right? Or if Devontae Smith isn't playing that week. So technically what we're doing is just points per gaming, a yearly projection, and then projecting it out across games. I wish we could, or what I would try and work on is projecting weekly games and how those target shares change based on the depth chart, and then projecting seasonal. But that's somewhat more sophisticated and complicated, and I don't think we could do that right now in 6 days in Excel from scratch. But that is one area of improvement. Actually project per game instead of just per gaming seasonal projections. That's also not using target share per game, for example, which would be one way of starting to do that. Let's see what else. Depth charts. I wish we had a way of calculating that, but I don't mind it, because you're going to feel differently who the touch leader in Arizona at running back is and wide receiver. So you can just change that, and it just modifies the projected volume slightly, which then you can just completely overwrite in the assumptions tab anyway. So it's not too important, but I wish we didn't have to make these two assumptions to start with, which we can always change and alter as news comes in, which is useful. It's very useful. We've got a lot of rushing attempts going on in Houston because Philip Lindsay turned up and Mark Ingram. That makes sense. So yeah, there are room for improvement, especially based on these two assumptions, but also, I don't know, projections are meant to be hand done, I think, a little bit more so than regression models. And we have all of that working for us for team volume and projecting a regressed target share average based on age and missing volume a little bit. And so that's all kind of built in. There's some pretty sophisticated stuff in there, I think, before you go on and just make your basic assumptions. Anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope someone's might get some use out of it. And even if they don't, I'm going to, because like I say, I'm already working on my own projections using it, and I'll modify it and change it as we go forward. But this copy of it's going to remain remarkably stable. It's going to be here for whoever watches these videos later, I guess. Hopefully one day someone will watch one of my videos on YouTube. And they'll be able to follow the link in the description below and find this thing's hopefully still in its exact same condition. Let me save this. I know. I think it's pretty cool. We came here from scratch, which you started blank, and we're ending up with this. I don't know how many hours exactly we used, but it was about six. Is this a fifth stream? And I did one offline by myself, so 6 sessions of 2 hours ago. Obviously, I sped a lot of things up where I can already write a lot of formulas. If you're starting from scratch, it should take you a lot longer than that. But I don't know. I don't know why I put this on big screen. I'm just updating the model in the description. Hey, Connor, how you doing? I'm starting to not like regression stuff for past attempts anymore. Yep. And Matt, what's his name? Matt Spencer, running over the RotoViz. He's doing a linear regression model that disagrees with ours a lot. I think going through head coach is the best basic assumption. But again, the thing with a projection model is you're meant to be able to override everything with your own assumptions. It's just meant to give you guide rails. Well, that's the way I see it anyway. What's a decent assumption, and now how am I going to circumvent that assumption, essentially? Nothing's a big enough sample is the ultimate truth in NFL football. Again, how many games do they play in baseball? Like 168 a season, and we're looking at a larger sample of 17 in 2021. Like baseball is somewhat predictive, and the sample size is somewhat decent. Like we're never going to get good samples in football. You just forget it. Players don't play long enough. Seasons aren't long enough. Enough teams don't play enough times. It's part of what makes NFL football different and fun and frustrating. It just kind of is. Gotta let go of the idea the NFL is actually predictable, which is, again, part of the fun for me. We're going to put a tab in here explaining where it came from, just for kicks. I'm just going to put a link to our playlist in there too, just in case anyone finds it some other way. Date on it, they said. It'll be fun, they said. There we go. All right. Projection model. Job done. It's not, I don't think at this point it's about the amount of research. There are literal PhD data scientists fiddling around with NFL stuff, man. Nothing is predictable. That's the other thing you got to know. The reason Nostradamus is a phony is because the world isn't predictable and we're dealing with something that happens in real life. Predictable isn't a thing. And what we're looking at is what has a trend. Where do trends exist? Trends can always be bucked and thrown out based on real life, just real life. But the NFL is always going to be more prone to more variance and trends being thrown out and bucked more regularly because data requires samples. It just does. A decent sample size. And the NFL plays literally 17 games is now what it does versus 168 a season. Enough teams don't play each other enough times over time that you can have a decent sample. It's not that it's not predictive, it's just more prone to variance. There are some things that are stable, but it's always going to require, I think, as a non-PhD data scientist studying the thing, a little more, not art, but a little more context reading. It's like a projection model. It's why it works that way. Because you can impart, if you code it to have enough specifics in it that we were just making, like with Tampa Bay and Houston, then essentially all you're doing is writing a code to make assumptions based on a very individual circumstance, which basically means you have to rewrite it every time because those circumstances are always different. We always have to dig down into too much individual circumstance because we don't have enough data, enough sample size to write an overall trend that works decently. It's coming to terms with what NFL statistics are. It's not exactly easy. I give up several times a week, just like this is pointless and also not pointless. It's got to be fun. If you're thinking you're rushing to an end result, I think you're gonna be disappointed. Ultimately, I know I was. I thought I would honestly create something for prospects at least where there was a single score. And I know lots of people present a single score, a single ranking, or a single word to describe what that prospect is. And the reason I didn't go that way is because it's not true. Like I know the bets I don't make, and I know the bets I do make, but I also know anything can happen based just on the nature of the game. The nature of what data is in the NFL. I really don't think Tony is good. Sorry, not specifically at you, Connor, but I really don't think so based on how he compares. But could he be? Yeah. Yeah. But it'll be, that was just weird. Not there is signs in the data that he's good. No, he's just, we don't know. That's where his potential for the NFL exists. I think I'm good enough to tell you who did well in college or who didn't do well, especially compared to past prospects. Tony didn't. And despite the smart people that disagree with me, Terrence Marshall didn't. And if you talk to them, what they're saying is though he was good. But what he actually did wasn't. You have to hope what could have been measures well past the past prospects, not what he actually did. Even I'm good enough to know those things, and that's about as close as we can get. That's not just an NFL thing. That's just a reality thing at some point. Hey, Dragon Dynasty, nice. Drago Dynasty, not sure. Hey Pete, I opened my fridge and I'm out of milk. Do you think my vacated milk drinking will get replaced with water? No, probably not. Probably not. That would be my guess. You see, that's not even it. The idea is you're out of milk, so your wife will start drinking milk. That's the logic of vacated targets. Not that you will replace it with water, because you're still talking about milk. You're still talking about targets. And so the idea is you vacate with your milk, and so your wife drinks the milk. But how? Because you left with your milk. That would be more accurate comparison. Which is why it's weird. I mean, the milk was dranken. I'm sorry, you dranken the milk. How can someone else drinking the milk? Brittle Bow, how you doing? Any personal thoughts on Elijah Moore's prospect? I think he's an amazing prospect. That's the thing. There are good prospects and bad prospects. It's basically a two-tier system. Elijah Moore is a really good prospect, but plenty of really good prospects fail. But he is in that bracket. He produced well at a high conference and was fairly highly drafted. He's gone to a NAF NFL team that I don't have a lot of hope for, but I think he's probably one of the most decent players on that team, even as a rookie. So there's plenty of opportunity in that way, but I don't have a lot of hope for the Jets. But I think Elijah Moore is great. He produced at every age, significantly above average. He produced on a team with two great players. In his rookie year, he had 9% of receiving yards or something like that with DK Metcalf and AJ Brown on the team. If we're talking about Elijah Moore, talk about Elijah Moore. I think he's really good. He did everything in college you could hope for. And he got high draft capital. So I'm a fan. He's going like in the start of the second round right now, and he has the potential to be that second round pick, like a Stephon Diggs fell to the second round in some instances. So did T.Y. Hilton. But they also fell in the NFL draft, so it's not a direct comparison. And he also doesn't play like them. But I think Jarvis Landry level player fall into the second round. It could be that. I'm a big fan. I'm going to go reflect on this. Fair enough. Yeah, that's what it is. It's you drank the milk. You drank all the milk. You drank all the milk and you left the kitchen, and now someone's going to come in and drinking all your milk. Now there's other milk, and the kitchen has to have milk. The kitchen is going to have milk. But the idea that your wife's going to drink the exact same amount of milk that you drank, or that it is in any way related to the milk that you drank, is a little odd. There you go. I prefer my apple metaphor, but that's good too. Brett Lobo, I can pull up stats on Elijah Moore, but at some point it's just good or bad, and he's good. There it is. Sorry, I was looking at something else, so not the right class is up. Let's see. I have him 98th percentile pre-draft and 95th percentile post-draft. He's one of those players that doesn't get a big per-game boost because he actually played, which, is actually a good thing, believe it or not. Somewhat of a muted ceiling. Again, he's playing for Mississippi in the SEC West, so, calm down. He's not going to have the yardage totals that Smith has playing for Alabama, but he got 1,193 yards that last year. And again, the share of the offense that represents is significant. It's like dominator rating, receiving yards percentages. He never had less than 34% of the yards after DK Metcalf and AJ Brown left. And like I said, he had 9% of the yards when they were there. And those were the players, right? I'm not misremembering that. I don't college much. Yeah, DK Metcalf and AJ Brown played with him in that first year. And again, he had a higher percentage of the yards with those two on the team than Smith did with whoever, Justin Jefferson and Chase, right? That's who was on his team. No, not Alabama. No, oh, that's even worse. It's Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy and shit, isn't it? Yeah, I know about Smith being held back by Jerry Jeudy and Ruggs and Jalen Waddle. I know that's even comparable. I do think Smith finally did well those last 2 years, but his draft capital holds him above Elijah Moore and nothing else. And his projected role in the NFL, I guess. Again, Elijah Moore, kind of that Landry type. Dante Smith could be kind of more of that X, as long as you don't rely too much on physical metrics. Which I don't. Matt, how you doing? Matt Chusey123? I don't know. Hey Pete, at work right now, but thanks for doing these. Appreciate it. No problem, man. I enjoyed it. Sitting here quietly working on a sheet is kind of my jam, so it's fine by me. I really do think this just makes it simple. This little interface. It's a lot easier to see when you're not on stream and you don't just have this tiny screen. But you can just make basic assumptions and it'll spit out a projection. I hope that means people find it easier. I've only been on stream 40, like this is not my usual 2-hour session, but here's the thing. I meant to have walked the dogs about 2 hours ago. I've got to get to town and take my kids to a 4-H camp meeting so they get to go. I also have to interview Katie Fowler for my podcast and do the Open Bar podcast, and that's after canceling 3 other things. So yeah, like nearly timed out again in half my eliminators. So unfortunately, the end session is a little bit. I'm checking my eliminators because I just realized I hadn't in a second. It is a little shorter, but hey, that's what it is. And it's finished, and the link's updated, and the interface I think a lot better. I think again we could continue to do better work on it, but at this point I'm just tweaking and prodding, and I would hope if you get into it you can start doing those things yourself. I am not on the clock anywhere, right? No. Yeah, we're good. Do you remember the man behind the curtain? We start doing projections and realize exactly how much of it is just an opinion, buffered by historical averages so it doesn't look too crazy. Or you can make it look extremely crazy, like well, not crazy, but hot takes come easy when you're making reasonable assumptions. Let's see. I think I have Dalvin Cook is one I'm thinking of. I think he's top 2 in my current version of projections. Where's mine? Where is it? I don't know where my things are. There it is. So this is where I've got to on it, and I really haven't. I'm hoping by the end of the week I'll be able to sit down with it again, but Let's see. I've managed to get Patrick Mahomes #1. What a hot take that is! But Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley are my top 4 running backs right now. Alvin Kamara's coming in 5th, but Eckler is surprisingly hard to get out the top 12. Like, I don't want to be overly high on him because there seems to be a lot of downside there, but I mean, kind of run out real quick. I think I'm still too low on a few of these sophomore and rookie running backs, but it's kind of hard to get high on them. Wide receiver, Adams, AJ Brown jumps up real quick. There's just no one else to pass to on the team. It's not that it's vacated. It's just that he already has a significant share of that offense. And even when you ratchet down the overall team's volume, it's just AJ Brown looks good. Stephon Diggs, probably a little too high. That's mostly Buffalo last year. Michael Thomas might need to be dinged a little more for Drew Brees not being there. CeeDee Lamb, I'm really going hard on CeeDee Lamb. This is me over projecting though. Probably has to come down. Let's see, what did I do? Yeah, I put CeeDee Lamb at 25% target share, which is probably a little too high. The regression model wants him around 19. I just really think this could be the year he takes over the role, you know? It's still keeping Amari Cooper pretty high, too. But anyway, Terry McLaurin is my top 12 again. I know I'm worried about Washington right now. Tight ends, what did I notice there? Yeah, Philadelphia really just needs to accept their best players are at tight end. But I don't think they will, which means Dallas got it, and Zach Ertz are probably over-projected for me right now. But, like, it's hard to bring them back down. Except for the fact that I, unlike a model, can think laterally and notice that the team just doesn't want it. It targeted both 17%, 19% last year. Like, if they were willing to lean in, that probably would have been a little higher. Zach Ertz was, like, averaging 25% beforehand. So we should probably bring at least Ertz down and ratchet up some volume. But unless Jalen Reagor gets good, there's no wide receiver to really take it. Devontae Smith's a rookie. I mean, Pedersen is remarkably consistent, which is a sign of a bad coach, actually. He's just had a history of having pretty good players. Unfortunately, I think that might be what's screwing over Philadelphia right now. Anyway, but yeah, I've been working. I'm just making volume assumptions and looking like I've been using a model. It's pretty easy to do. Atlanta's got missing targets still, apparently. Oh, Paul Julio Jones down to 15 games. That's why. Just in case. Anyway. It's a fun model to use. It's good in the face, I think. I wouldn't like to say. I don't want to. Honestly, I think it's a few things. One, people like showing new things. Two, when players start to fade, even if they start to fade young, it is good to lean into that. See Odell Beckham, unfortunately, and a few other players recently. But really, I think a lot of it is he was playing so close. There was just no chance for exciting plays. He was doing a lot with a little, but it was a little to start off with. You're not catching downfield bombs. That's Chase Claypool. You're not catching huge touchdown shares. That's Chase Claypool. You're also not getting excessive volume like in the middle of the field, which, you know, Julian Edelman and Jarvis Landry, we've gotten used to being impressed by. And that's Deontay Johnson. And so, yeah, doing something, being exceptionally efficient, 1 yard past the line of scrimmage just doesn't look impressive. I honestly think that's part of it. There's no way of looking at what he actually did on the level type of volume he was getting, not saying that is impressive last year. And that's before the years before that when he was doing impressive things further down the field. So it just feels like people are disappointed with what they saw because it was so close to the line of scrimmage, and no one wants to be last out. I'm okay being last out on a good player. I think there's a lot of stuff going in there. Also, everyone reads Chase Claypool differently because they're not as obsessed with college production as I am. So they see his likely touchdown regression and think, well, he'll ratchet up volume. And my assumption is he can't. He can't, or he never has before. So we'll have to see. I mean, there's a lot of upside in Chase Claypool if he does. I'm not selling cheap. I've got him on a few teams, but no one's ever offered me anything I'd sell him for. And I really do think it's Juju over Claypool. But then again, they've both got to deal with Big Ben this year. I've got no idea what he's going to be. Deontay Johnson is good in that special way. The outside of Chris Godwin doesn't enter into the top 12, or Jarvis Landry's huge touchdown share that 1 year. I want to like Deontay Johnson more, but it's kind of they're drafted so close together, you do kind of have to overdraft Juju, which I do, or you have to make your choice. Sorry, I got someone trying to teach me about a formula. I don't know. I can't read it quick enough. I was wondering if there's a way of comparing what a similarity calculation looks like when you're comparing players' actual yearly production in the NFL. Like, who looks like Mark Andrews historically? Does the start of his career look like Jimmy Graham? Does it look like Rob Gronkowski? Does it look like not like Travis Kelce, who was a lot slower to start? Ooh, also, I gotta send my Mark Andrews article off the player profiler, but I don't know where it goes. All right, guys, that's a full hour. So I'm going to get out of here. I got to walk dogs. I got to get my kids to that 4-H thing and all this stuff I said before. So I apologize. It's a short stream today, but I did get a stream in. So I feel accomplished. And like I say, I don't know what more there is to add to that. There's plenty of things you could do to it, but it just feels like tweaking at this point. I think it's built. Now it's about decorating. And you can decorate your model or your house however you want, I guess. So yeah. You sent me the comparison sheet. Probably at one point. I was actually asking Chris about how he does that. Not because I want his formula, but I'm like, is there a way I can do that with like position finishes or something? Just kind of, again, compare how Mark Andrews' career is going, because it is quite striking how few players have as many position finishes, 1 to 3, as he does in the top 6 or the top 12 or whatever. Mike Gesicki in the top 12 as well. Like, maybe I was high on Mike Gesicki last year. Maybe I'm a little low now after expecting he did get a top 12 season again, but it was disappointing. Maybe I should be higher. Maybe this is a career trajectory thing that I should stay on. And so I was looking for just some easy comparison. One of actually, I'll show you what I was looking at. I've been doing this for years, where it's like a Jacob Rickroad format. And where my NFL data? There it is. I have to stream. No, not right now. Where you look up their career stats, year 1, 2, and 3, or you can do it by career year. And what I was importing was their averages, like the average yards per team pass attempt, or their average touches per game, I think that is. Touches per game, targets per game? I don't know. I got to look it up. and their TD rate and just the average of their career. And that made me think if there was something I could put in here to like compare, to filter so that I can add more IDs and see what the start of Mark Andrews' career looks like compared to other players. Anyway, this is what I was working on. It's in the NFL database. I keep thinking about adding it to our NFL database, but every time I add an app, it seems to get outdated pretty quick and people get bored of it. But I like them because in that way I don't have to continually filter the actual database and sort and stuff. Instead, I can just call up different stats and see it all lined up by the career year or whatever. I find that more usable form of our data. So yeah, that's why I was wondering, because I've got this career lookup thing going, where I can just add the ID and it pulls up their whole career stats. Right now, I just have their positional finishes. This is their touchdown rate and then their target share. But you can pull up anything you want this way, just to see how it's progressing. Because there's not a lot of trends. Like there isn't a continual upswing of target share or anything. You tend to just break out big one year, but when you especially look at tight end, which is a slower burn, and you see the number of tight ends with, 2 finishes in the top 12 and Mark Andrews and Mike Gesicki is on the list, you're like, is that a thing? Am I too low? Because, you got Gronkowski, Kittle, Kelsey, Graham. It's a hell of a list to be on. And this isn't all tight ends, by the way. This is just tight ends in the NFL right now. Those are the IDs I had. But that's why I was interested in it. Anyway, problem for another day, I guess. I'm going to get out of here. You can show me in Discord. Again, it's not Chris's comparison sheet. I was just wondering on his and some other nerds' thoughts on how to do that type of thing. And they're going off on it a little bit in the group chat here. But yeah, I'd appreciate it. I'll look at what you're thinking of. I can calculate similarity, but there's a weird dissonance between that and the actual results, and Chris seems to be pretty good at it. So I was wondering on his specific thoughts on it. But what was I doing? Leaving. That was it. I'm out here to do all the things I said. I've got so many messages to catch up with, people asking me to do things or research things, and I promise I'm trying to get to some of it. I've got one guy sitting here on Patreon that's been messaged me like a week ago. I'm trying to catch up. I swear. But finishing this is a big part of that, I think, because it's been on my mind. I've been working hard on it. I hope you guys find some use out of it. And if not, hey, I did it for the fun, and it was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate those of you who showed up to join in. So thanks again. I'm going to get out of here and take care of my life a little bit, I think. So talk to you later. Thanks again. See you on the next video whenever I come up with another video idea, because it's been a while since I did that as well. I've been very much working and making content about the work over the last week or so, because sometimes that has to happen. I'm going to try and get the work done as quick as I can so I can get back to making content. But right now it's all about actually trying to do my own work so I can make content about it. So it might be another week or so before I'm ready for that, especially until I finish projections and create that weekly projection model out of it. Then I'm probably not going to be back full steam making as much content as usual, but there'll still be some things. Podcast is coming out, an occasional video, still writing articles. It's slow for me. I normally make content at a faster rate than most, I think. So yeah. Appreciate you checking it out. Let me know if there's something you want to see, because I could use ideas, frankly. And I'll see you again next time. Thanks again. Good luck making projections, I guess. Past attempts have to go somewhere. Like milk, I guess. See you later.